This is Action Smash Demolition with Steve The Scum. Every week, WGD Weekly. We listen to it, you should too. You better or we're gonna kick your stinking teeth in.
Hey there, all you savages. Welcome back to Wrestling's Glory Days Weekly Podcast, WGD Weekly with Steve The Scum. My name is Steve, and with me, as always, a man who thinks, at least he thinks he's over, The Scum.
That's right, Steve. In my mind and in the minds of our legions of loyal fans across Scum Nation, it's hard to doubt, like a previous guest of us once said, I'm over. Always a pleasure to be back here, as usual, with you, my longtime tag team partner. Always a pleasure to be working with the boys over at Wrestling's Glory Days on Facebook. Steve, big show here tonight, my friend. Why don't you let the listeners in on what's shaking down here tonight?
Absolutely, man. We got DDP here, second part of our accountability week. We had Jake the Snake Roberts last week. We're a little bit late with our release this week because of WrestleCade, but we're happy to get this out to you. DDP here with us tonight on WGD Weekly with Steve The Scum. You know, we're all jacked up for this. The DDP was wicked cool. Considering, you know, he was outside. It was really bad weather down in Orlando. Isn't that right?
Yeah, Steve, but again, he very accommodating was DDP. What happened was we had the interview scheduled, and a couple of days before, he got a call from WWE, and the Triple H wanted him to come down and check out and work with some of the up-and-comers down at the NXT facility. And, hey, I mean, it's a tough choice there. I mean, Steve The Scum or the game, but, you know, I think that he decided that he'd get a little bit of both, which who could blame him there? And so we have maybe a little bit shorter. The interview went, we kind of focused a little less because of our time restraints on going through his career and more on some of the stuff that he's been doing more recently and how that relates maybe to his great career in the wrestling business. Not to give away any of the results here, so to speak, not to give a spoiler alert, but as you'll see in there, possibility that Steve The Scum might be getting whipped into shape a little bit, or at least led down that path by the king of Bada Bang, as you'll find out. And still to come, a little more to the norm, let's say, of our interview process. We will have DDP back for a part 2 coming up with the three-time WCW World Champion. Steve?
Oh, yeah, man. I'm psyched for that, too. I'm glad he's able to agree to a second part. Well, maybe you'll get a little bit more into his career in that second part, so stay tuned for that in next season. So, Scum, we had an awesome WrestleCade weekend. It was an amazing time. Just some awesome stories came out of that weekend. And we're going to get to that a little bit later. We're going to share some stories from WrestleCade, our personal experiences. But before we do that, before we talk to DDP, and get into those stories like we talked about in Winston-Salem this past weekend, Scum, tell our listeners of the story of what happened to Just Incredible, our own guest, the extraordinary circumstances that made him have to drive to Winston-Salem from Connecticut as opposed to fly.
Yeah. Well, Steve, you're aware of it. Justin was aware of it. His wife, Jill, was aware of it. But not anyone else in attendance of the 2,000 plus, 2,500 plus at WrestleCade were aware that Justin had been, when we initially signed him on to come down, appear with WGD Weekly, WrestleCade had booked Justin to be the special referee in the I Quit match between Tommy Dreamer and C.W. Anderson. Now, everything, seemed in order, and, why would anyone have an inkling of anything differently? But the last few days before the event, Justin kind of got thrown a few curveballs, let's say. Due to the government shutdown, he had some issues with his paperwork and spent a whole day at the Department of Motor Vehicles and came up empty-handed. Now, we weren't aware of that just because we talked to him. He had said that he was taking care of it. And then all of a sudden, spoke with him the day of the flight. Steve, you were coming up from Georgia. We're going to pick him up. Everything seemed in order. Well, he wasn't able to get the paperwork that he needed. So he wasn't able to take the flight. personally, me thinking like, uh-oh, he's not going to be able to make it. The circumstances out of his control, human circumstances that happen, right? Well, come to find out that he's already on the road. He's behind the wheel of his car, and he's driving 670, almost 700 miles on his own coin to get down there and make the appearance for WrestleCade. I mean, he said to me, I've made some mistakes in the past. I've not going to make those mistakes again. The fans are what made me. You guys have been great to me, and I don't want to disappoint you. So, little known fact, now that people have read the story that I wrote, and I think it's been pretty well received, just incredible, going above and beyond to make it down to WrestleCade. Took a hit as far as his own finances to be there, but made it down there, shook every hand, took every picture, signed every autograph, put on a hell of a show in the main event there with Dreamer and CW. And I just thought it deserved some recognition, Steve. A hell of a guy. He was great to us, and he was great to his fans. So hats off to Just Incredible, a real class act in my mind.
Oh, totally. An outstanding story there, Scum. Really true to his word. He committed. He made through on his commitments, and that's a real manly thing to do. And I know it was really a difficult situation trying to get down here last minute by driving. It's a pain in the ass. If you ever driven up and down the East Coast, you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, we're going to move on from there, from one WrestleCade guest to another, Diamond Dallas Page. He was with us. We have it here now. So without further ado, let's just take you to that interview with Diamond Dallas Page. All right, folks, right here tonight, we got him, Diamond Dallas Page, DDP himself, the 3-time World Heavyweight Champion. He's with Steve The Scum. Wanted to check out what he was doing down in Orlando. How's it going tonight, Dallas?
Unstoppable. How about you?
Hell yeah, man. We're doing great as well. We hear you're down in Orlando tonight, so tell us what you're doing down there.
WWE has their WWE PC, which is the performance center that they have here in Orlando. And tonight they're actually doing their filming. And they'll film 4 TV shows for Hulu and a bunch of bits. I think they're in about 39 different countries as well. So these are the young guys that are going to come up the ranks and hopefully get an opportunity, at the show. And some of them have gone up before in the WWE and then been brought back down because they're not ready yet or whatever. But this is a great, I guess it would be like a AAA ball type situation. And it gets them in front of people, the cameras. They've got the Trinitron. They actually film at a college called Full Sail, like FULLSAIL. It's a production school that deals with film and directing and acting. So it's a pretty all one-stop shop college, and the WWE has put their mark in here and developed an amazing little area that holds about 1,000 or so people, and the guys get to do their thing, and not just in front of the people. They get the cameras and the shots, and the Full Sail students get to practice as cameramen and all the real life situation that is being on TV. So I came down here today just to see the operation, which is amazing. And then I'm heading over to the Performance Center tomorrow morning where I will do a DDP yoga workshop and a little seminar situation. And I do them around the world. I'll be in my next one after this is in Dover, New Hampshire. It's almost all sold out at so you can see it all information on ddpyoga.com. Another one I'm doing in Atlanta. After that, I've got another one I'm going to be doing in the UK. I'm doing a couple in the UK. So, then I'll end up back in Mexico. I'm traveling all around. I got Detroit coming up. So a lot of these workshops are where I get together with anywhere from 40 to 100 people, and take them through what, DDP Yoga is all about. And a lot of people, on your show are hearing maybe for the first time that DDP, Diamond Dallas Page, actually has a yoga program. But understand, I'm the guy who wouldn't be caught dead doing yoga the first 42 years of my life. So I get people who go, yoga? I get that, But when you don't start wrestling until you're 35 years old, your career does not take off until you're 40. Well, bottom line is, you'll do anything, to find ways to hold back the hands of time. And in 1996, I turned 40, and my career took off like a rocket. 97 and 98, I was on top of the world, and then I blew my back out. I blew my back out so badly that 3 different specialists said my career was over. So now, faced with a career-ending injury and the loss of a multi-million-dollar 3-year deal, pretty much do anything, you know. So I reluctantly started doing some yoga through these VHS tapes, and I couldn't figure out a lot of the moves because they were too advanced or whatever, and I got frustrated quite a bit. But I could feel it within the first couple of days starting to help me a little bit. Within the first couple of weeks, I felt my flexibility and core strength coming back. And then one night I just figured, well, you know what? I'm doing rehab. I'm doing this yoga. My body's feeling better. What if I mix the rehabilitation techniques with the yoga positions? And I was like, wow, okay, that works. And I even feel better. Then I added in old school calisthenics, push-ups, squats, crunches, done in a slow burn movement, which means I'd lower for 3 or 5 or a count of 10. Then I'd hold there, and then I'd push back up the same count of 3 or 5 or 10. And when I realized, when you do like a slow burn push-up or a curl, and your legs, your quads and your glutes flexed and engaged, you can watch a heart monitor and watch your heart rate start to elevate, standing still, just by engaging and flexing muscles. And then I did some further research and realized that every single time you flex or engage a muscle, your heart has to beat faster to get the blood to the muscle. So what DDP yoga has become is a kick-ass cardiovascular workout that will dramatically increase your flexibility and strengthen your core like never before, all with minimal joint impact. And the proof is in the pudding. When I started this, they said my career was over. I was 42. Less than 3 months later, I was back in the ring. And at 43 years young, I was a heavyweight champ of the world.
That is some fantastic stuff. And now there's testimonials all over the internet. Just like you said, Paige, we have a young man by the name of Arthur who is definitely, if you have just kind of, folks, if you're just, listening to our show now and hadn't heard about DDP yoga, if you just simply do a search on YouTube, you're going to come to a young man who used to be a military ranger. He hurt his back falling out of airplanes to defend our country, was really out of shape, and you can see an amazing transformation with Arthur. Of course, Diamond Dallas Page, the accountability crib, working with Jake Roberts, who was a guest on our show just last week. Of course, Scott Hall, some great stuff there. But Paige, while we got you here, we do focus on the classic part of professional wrestling. Huge fans of classic pro wrestling, and I know that you're a fan as well. There's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of video out there of you watching some old footage. So take us back real quick, because I know you're watching some young talent here. What was it like working with a guy, and I know this is kind of an arbitrary question, but I wondered if they'd have you sit down and do a little bit of announcing while you're there, considering you'd have one of the few people to have training with Gordon Solie.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy. Yeah, right here in Florida, too. When I went and tried out at the WWE years, 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, when I went, I guess it was, 20, it had to be like 25 years ago, I tried out the WWF as an announcer. And when I first was doing, I was doing the play-by-play. So when I was doing it, don't say good God. I hear in my headset, don't say baby. Don't say daddy. Don't say this. Don't say that. It was like stripping me, all my little cliche stuff. It made me just do the color. And afterwards, they walked in. They said, okay, that was good. And they were like, okay, now, Lord Alfred Hayes, you do the play-by-play, the color. Lord Alfred Hayes, you do the color. Dallas, you do the play-by-play. And I couldn't do it today. But back then, we got done with that match. Lord Alfred Hayes pushed himself away from the table, and he looked at me and he said, good God, man, how did you ever learn to do play-by-play like that? That was amazing. And I said, well, when you sit across from Gordon Solie for a year and a half, you're bound to learn something.
Absolutely.
Well, Dallas, I know your time's limited here, so we gonna move right along. Ask you about a couple of guys that you're currently working with, that anyone who has any form of access to a computer or any type device would know this. ask you to bring us back real quick. I know that when you first got into wrestling, after managing for a few years, you approached Jake Roberts about some advice about the psychology of the business, and also while you were a manager, you had the Diamond Stud at the time, Scott Hall, working with you. Both of those guys, you've had a major part in turning their lives around. So if you could briefly, before we run out of time here, if you could go through with us, what Jake kind of told you way back when, that's teaching you about the psychology of the business, and how you met Scott, and how your relationship with the two has evolved to where it is today, that you're being able to be a big help.
Well, I think it's tough to give a Cliff Notes, conversation about that, but I'll do my best. I met Jake Roberts in 1986. He had come into my nightclub in Fort Myers, Florida, and I was a big fan of his. And I walked up to him, we had a few drinks, had a few laughs, and then he came back because, of course, he never paid for his drinks in my club. And later on, I got into wrestling. I didn't see him for a while. And then I went from there to being just a manager at some point to WCW, and they wouldn't let me manage anymore because I was too over the top, taking attention away from the wrestler. And they said, what we should have done is put you in a pair of tights and boots and see if you can do this. And I'd been down that power plant about maybe 2 or 3 months, and Jake Roberts had just signed with WCW. And when he came down to the power plant, he saw me, and we started talking. Aren't you the guy that I used to drink with in Fort Myers, Florida? Like, how did you remember that? And we just bonded, and I got to do a couple road shows with him and be, his driver and learn from him. And then I tore my rotator cuff when me and Kevin Nash were tag teaming together, and they fired me. And I didn't see Jake in about 5 months because he had a falling out with his contract as well. And he called me up to see how I was doing. He heard I tore my rotator cuff. And we started talking, and he let me know that him and his wife were split up again. And so I asked my wife if he could move in. That's the first time Jake Roberts moved in with me. I was like 1993, about 20 years ago. And I was so excited to finally get the arm bandage I had because I had rotator cuff surgery, and I couldn't wait to get in the ring with him so he could teach me. And his feelings were that you're going to learn more from me sitting on the couch going over your matches than you'll ever learn from me in the ring. You already know all the moves. You just need to know when, why, and how to get the people involved. And over the next few years, I'd bring my matches to him, and he would critique them for me. And he was a big part of, I always say, without Dusty Rhodes, there is no Diamond Dallas Page, but without Jake Roberts, there's never DDP, the main eventer. And he helped me out a lot. And when it came time, over the years, I've helped him financially here and there whenever he needed something, because I made a lot of money because of what he taught me. And I got to live the dream at a whole different level. And the last time I talked to him, which is a little over a year ago, I could tell he was really bad. And I just reached out to him, offered him an opportunity, but he had to work for it to get me to do it with him. And he did. He on his own, he lost like 20 pounds. He was like 307 pounds, a shell of the man he once was. And I told him, lose 20 pounds in X amount of time, I'll bring you to my house in Atlanta. And so I did. I don't say anything I don't do. And brought him in, and he had an amazing run over this last year. He's lost 70 pounds. I think he's put about 20 back on since he left. But he'll get it back off again. But he's in the ring. He's doing his thing. Smaller shows and tag teams and stuff. But he looks good out there. And so I don't think he should be wrestling anymore, but that's not for me to say. He loves it, and he's leading on his own terms. About 10 months ago, I got a call from X-Pac. Not a call, a tweet, actually a direct mail tweet asking me to help Scott Hall. He really thought he was going to kill himself. Please. It was more of a plea. So Scott Hall has been one of my close friends for over 20 years. I created that whole gimmick that he had. The black hair, the brush cut 5 o'clock shadow, the toothpick, all mine. and he'll be the first to tell you. I mean, that's the really short version of that. And took him from, blonde, like a blonde, brownish hair with a big walrus mustache, and turned him into what would become best known as Razor Ramon. But it was the Diamond Stud before it was Razor Ramon. And Scotty and I had some real success. And as it turned out, when he called me and asked me to help him get a job, his wife was pregnant with Cody. Now, that's the connection when you really think about that. That shows you how long ago it is, because Cody's 23 now. And when I talked to him on the phone after I got the message from Xbox, he was a mess. The call's up on DDP TV. It's all right there. It's live. It's not live, but it's live to tape. We didn't edit shit. We just friggin' started playing it and let it go. And long story short, about a month and a half later, Scott, after almost dying, taking three, he's got defibrillators in his heart. That's, went off on him 3 times, which means your heart stopped. That was enough to scare the hell out of him, I guess, and enough that, he went to the hospital and he got detoxed. And, we had enough strength to come. About 2 weeks later, he came to Atlanta, to my home. And he looks amazing. He's dropped about 50 pounds. He's got a new hip in his body. He feels great. He's touring right now with X-Pac and Kevin Nash in the UK right now. They paid him a ridiculous amount of money to come and do a Q&A and autograph sessions. And he's got his relationship back with his son, Cody, who comes over to my house all the time. And he got his lights back. It's not because of DDP yoga. It's because of a lifestyle. DDP yoga just happens to be a part of that lifestyle. And what I mean by that is, as athletes and wrestlers, we beat the fuck out of our body. The weight room, we beat the fuck out of our body. Well, DDP yoga does not beat your body up. It helps heal your body. And that's what it's all about. When especially you're a guy like Jake or Scott, whose body is in constant pain. So when you can help them relieve the pain, well, then you can start thinking about getting healthy. When you start thinking about getting healthy, you start to feel way better than you did when you were high. So it's like a no-brainer. But when you're addicted, you have an addictive personality, you have an addiction, an addict, you got to work extra hard on it or find that way to let it go. And right now, I believe Scott Hall, for the moment, has let that shit go. His words, I don't look in the rearview mirror anymore. I look out the front windshield, way bigger opportunity. And he's out there doing his thing. He's got his life back. He's got his kids back. Jake Roberts right now is in Missouri getting his first number 1 daughter, who is in, if you remember her, if you saw Beyond the Mat, it's the same girl, Brandy. And she's got MS, and Jake is going out to get her because it's gotten worse and get his daughter that he has reaffirmed his solid relationship with, who was at him and her 2 twin brothers, Derek and Dustin, who were there when Jake got inducted in the Cauliflower Alley Hall of Fame. I was there. I inducted him. Bottom line is, he is going and getting her and driving her to Atlanta so they can both live together and he can take care of his little girl.
That is fantastic to hear. I mean, what a great turnaround. And yeah, Dallas, while we still have you for another minute here, one last thing to touch on involving those guys, just because everybody that's been following, I think everyone across the internet wrestling community that's been following the great work you've been doing with those 2 gentlemen, you can't help but hear about rumblings about them excuse the pun, possibly having a chance at this year's Royal Rumble. Do you think, would you know that there's been any feelers put out, or that there's a possibility we see Jake, Scott, or heck, even Cody?
I have no
this year
idea.
At the Royal
and
Rumble?
I know better to even have an idea about it. I could hope, just like every other fan out there. I would love to, to see them do something that would, pop the freaking crowd like crazy. But, you never know.
Now, physically, though, would you say?
I don't know about Scott. I don't know if we'll ever see Scott back in the ring. He's smarter than the average bear when it comes to that. Like when it came to rehabbing his hip, this has been I wouldn't say taking its time. I would say a cautious rehab, and very smart. Scott realizes his body was always his business, his baby. All of a sudden he's like, who the fuck's in my body? Where's his body? Because he let it go because of the drugs and the and the booze. Well, he's getting his body back, and I don't think he'll. Every time you walk out in that ring, people can think whatever they want about professional wrestling. One thing's a fact: you can't fake gravity. And Scott's taken a shitload of bumps, and he's been blessed with a new hip and no pain in that hip. It was like torture walking, laying down, sleeping. So I don't know if he's going to risk that. Jake, on the other hand, Jake could go in the Royal Rumble and go fucking 20 minutes. And probably be crippled afterwards, but we did it. So you got to remember what animal you're talking about.
Sure. Well, I saw Jake not too long ago to show up in New Jersey for Pro Wrestling Syndicate. He spiked some guy with a couple DDTs. He looked like he could still move in there.
The next day, let's make it. I'm in 10 times the shape Jake is. Okay, he's 58. I'm 57. I wouldn't do what he does. All right, because I need my body is my machine. I'm going to be out here working out tomorrow with a bunch of kids that are between 20 and 30 years old. And my goal is not to smoke them. My goal is to teach them how to help heal their body, how to keep their body strong and supple. Because when you're really flexible, you're like Gumby. But when you're doing DDP yoga, you're flexible and strong. I'm not just stretching out your muscles. I'm strengthening your ligaments, your tendons, and your muscles while I'm strengthening and lengthening them, plus giving you a kick-ass cardiovascular workout. So I'm hoping that a few of these guys actually get it. Or they'll get it later. Like when you get to Jericho when you're 40 and you think your fucking career's over, like I did, and all of a sudden he finds DDP yoga and he's addicted to it, and it's the only workout that he does. All of a sudden he's back to making $1 million a year in the ring and kicking ass with his band on the road. Couldn't do either before DDP yoga. He'll be the first to tell you. Ryback, same thing. He rehabbed his body, DDP yoga. Still does it religiously. Dustin Rhodes, religiously. There's a bunch of guys.
He looks great now. He came back recently, and you could tell his physical condition is better than it was in 1998.
And that's what I'm saying. So will they get the secret of this? I don't know. But I know that I've got people around the world getting this. And I said it 5 years ago. Actually, it was 3 years ago when I first said it. Within 5 years, what I'm doing with DDP yoga, it's going to eclipse what I've done in the 90s in professional wrestling. And that's saying something, since I was one of the biggest names in the world over that 5-year period.
That is awesome. And you have a friend from the business that we've talked with recently, Mark Miro, who says the same exact thing. He swears up and down that you're going to be the next big thing when it comes to health and nutrition. He swears by it, so that's fantastic. Now, Dallas, I know your time is very valuable, and you've been gracious enough to stay on even a little bit longer than you said. So we're going to let you go. But before we do, we just wanted to make a quick mention. On November 30th, you're going to be up in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. You're on the bill for WrestleCade. Steve the Scum, we will be there as well. So we want to make sure that we run into you, have a few minutes to talk. And we just wanted to say thanks once again. Go on back inside and enjoy the NXT show. I know it's freezing cold out. I'm up here in Atlanta. You're not missing anything here either, man. It's freezing as hell. But I just want to say thanks once again. Scum, anything to add before we let Paige off the line?
Just wanted to say thanks. Realize that you're real busy tonight, especially. You know, we appreciate you taking the time you did.
Now, you said you live in Atlanta.
I do, yes.
You need to get your ass over. We'll get your work out at the accountability crib, and you'll see what this is all about.
I would love to.
Well, I'll tell you what. Get in touch with my daughter, Brittany, and she'll line it up.
I think you
Sounds
can whip
great.
us into shape.
I just like this. I can guide. I didn't do the work for Jake and Scott. I didn't do the work for the disabled veteran Arthur Borman. I didn't do the work for thousands of people. I guided them. If you listen to what I tell you and you actually do it, one of the biggest lines I get from people, you know what? I'm going to try your DDP yoga. And then I roll into my best Yoda, not yoga, Yoda. And I say, there is no try. There is only to do.
That is great. And you know, for what it's worth, I know myself and I know the Scum can take a chest slap from you or Jake better than that intern you got. I promise you that.
All right, guys. Anybody listening to heard about DDP Yoga, go to ddpyoga.com. If you're interested in check it out, investing in your life. Not to just to change your life, but to own it. And that's what Jake and Scott are doing right now. They're owning their lives. All right, guys. It's been your pleasure.
All right, Scum. DDP, that was great. I don't know if I heard this right. I think I did, and I'm sure you listeners out there did. I think we just got invited to the accountability crib, my man.
Yeah, that's the way I'm seeing it. I can't wait to get down there and check out Dallas's place. We'll certainly be in contact with him. That's for sure. What a generous offer by Diamond Dallas Page to open up the doors to Steve the Scum. Pretty good stuff.
Yeah, man, that's pretty awesome. I was pretty psyched to hear that. I'll tell you what, I would, if I'm going to go to a gym or go somewhere and just have some stranger just kick the daylights out of me, no two guys better than Diamond Dallas Page and maybe even Jake the Snake Roberts. And I know that we saw both of those guys at WrestleCade. That was pretty cool to be able to meet those guys in person after having had a chance to interview with them.
Absolutely. Another extremely large man to see in person that might be down there is, what about the size of Cody Hall when we stopped and talked to him up at WrestleCade? Is that kid a monster or what, Steve?
Oh, man, tell me about it. I'll tell you what, guys. We posted pictures up at WGD Weekly with Steve the Scum, and let's kind of put a few things into perspective here. I stand at about 5'11", 185, 190 pounds. My partner, the Scum, he's about 6'1", somewhere in there. Scum, correct me if I'm wrong. Couple 100 pounds, I'm sure.
Yeah,
and
a couple 100 pounds of twisted steel.
Oh, yes, of course. Twisted steel. Sorry about that, folks. Twisted steel. That said, standing next to Cody Hall, we both look like infants.
Absolutely. As I like to refer to him, the son of the bad guy. Pretty cool guy, though, to talk to. You know, seemed to be well-grounded and actually was very generous, was one of the 14 competitors that were happy to sign one of the official WrestleCade posters that we're going to be giving away coming up here in Season 2, Steve. I know Greg the Hammer Valentine, a WWE Hall of Famer, will be on there. Our buddy Buff the Stuff, Rick Steiner, referee Tommy Young, just a host of guys. Carlito signed, Just Incredible, of course, signed. 14 signatures in all. That'll be a giveaway here early on in Season 2. A great piece of memorabilia for some fan. But, yeah, Cody Hall was great, seemed well-grounded, seemed disappointed because he wanted to get in the ring and show his stuff in front of that big crowd there, Steve.
Yeah, he did. He was sincerely upset that he wasn't going to be able to go. I know they had him booked in a match, and it turned out to be just a singles match as opposed to a three-way. So disappointing day for Cody in the ring, but certainly a great day for us and a lot of wrestling fans. There were thousands of people there. We were able to, if you hadn't heard already, we sponsored Just Incredible. We obviously had a little bit of a snafu, or he did, on his way down, but he made it. He got out of his car. He handed over the hotel keys to his wife and walked right over to the event with us and worked all day and all night thereafter. So it was really great to see Just Incredible working at our table with us. Very good human being as far as just being someone that was personable. Watching all the fans come up and watching the kids. Couple of crazy things that I thought Scum from WrestleCade was, a lot of the people that gave Justin words of encouragement and that we're proud of them, or we're proud of you for, going to rehab and being a year sober and everything. Those are some pretty big, steps. And anybody that's been through a rehabilitation program or has family members out there that has done that, that a year sober is a pretty big deal. And then, that dedication to his fans to get in the car, last minute drive down, like you were saying, Scum, some unbelievable stuff. But I wanted to run by you just a few things and maybe get your thoughts on what you thought of these things as well. One of the really cool things I took away from WrestleCade was watching the main event that night, which was, and we've talked about this already, certainly at minimum pay-per-view quality, main event quality on a Monday Night Raw. That Matt Hardy-Carlito ladder match for the first WrestleCade championship was a fantastic match, great finish, classic ladder match. And you and I, Scum, got to watch that match sitting next to Robert Gibson of the Rock and Roll Express, Bobby Fulton from the Fantastics, both the Headbangers, Mosh and Thrasher, and Tommy Dreamer even was hanging out for a little bit watching the end of that match. So it was really an incredible moment to sit back and watch the main event of WrestleCade and kind of get the perspective of some great performers past as to what was going on in the ring.
Yeah, literally from behind the curtain. I mean, we say that we're going to draw back the curtain every now and then. We use that analogy. We were literally holding the curtain open, sitting there watching with those guys. And it was really cool. I like when they did one of the chair shots and to hear Bobby Fulton lean over to Headbanger Thrasher and like, hey, do you get a hand up there? What happened? And then Thrasher went into a comical story about his daughter's boyfriend that was giving him some slack about like, oh, those chairs you guys use, they're fake, right? So he said, well, why don't you let me show you if they're fake? And he says that he waffles his daughter's boyfriend over the back with a steel chair, and the kid, he sucked it up like he was tough, but the next day was in the hospital with back issues.
Just one of the great stories. And people watching at the bar, there was a hotel attached to the convention center, a really cool, nifty little area down there in Winston-Salem. A lot of great bars and eateries right around the corner. So we enjoyed ourselves, but people watching and watching some of the wrestlers roll into the bar Friday and Saturday night with some cool stuff. We made some good friends there. A couple of girls from WOW. That young lady, Fire, she was cool as hell. We had a chance to hang out with her. Really nice girl. She's got a pretty big future ahead of her, man. Real talented girl, real beautiful. I think she'll do just fine if she sticks with it. But, it was kind of funny. I made mention to the guys on the admin thread at Wrestling's Glory Days that I was kind of disappointed that my, vision of walking through this hotel and just seeing random wrestlers in character in their garb just kind of walking around never really came to fruition, but it actually did late Saturday after the Fan Fest event. There was about a 90-minute intermission between the Fan Fest and the gates opening for the wrestling event. So a lot of the performers kind of snuck back over and, grabbed a bite to eat or whatever have you, wanted to take a little time and, have some downtime. So as we're walking through the hotel lobby, I was talking with you and I look up and I see the Warlord in like full face paint wrestling gear, just kind of moseying on through the hotel lobby. And it was funny as hell, man. It's probably one of those had to be there moments, but it was just kind of funny, like in a really nice hotel in the lobby with the cathedral ceilings and huge chandeliers and everything's nice and marble floors and all that stuff. And here comes the Warlord walking out of the bar with face paint on, sitting next to Kevin Sullivan.
Yeah, absolutely. it was funny to see him. Yeah, it didn't necessarily seem like he was in the greatest of moods, unlike a lot of the guys there. But hey, I'll tell you what, I'm not one to argue with the Warlord at about 6'8" and still just as jacked as he was back in the early '90s. You know, if he's having a bad day, I think I'll stay right out of that guy's way. I know you feel the same way. But another guy that seemed to be that at first we didn't even know who he was wandering around, seemed to be just dying for some attention almost, was not sure if he was hungry and swallowed his piano whole, but what about the Maestro, or as we first thought it was, Bombshell Billy strolling around the lobby area?
I'm probably the Maestro is probably wondering why he had two half-drunk idiots following him around screaming "Bombshell, bombshell." But it was good to know that it wasn't actually him at the end. It was the Maestro. That was some funny stuff. You know, we got a lot of contacts. Something else, Scum, that was pretty funny. And you know, my favorite official of all time, Tommy Young. We're walking around and we're getting ready to go down into the event itself and set up. We had a little, vendor's table there for Justin and selling some of his merchandise and whatnot. Now, of all the things, and there's a bunch of referees there that week that were working the event. They're all young guys. They're all in pretty good shape. So I see a pair of feet, and the Scum, you saw this, and you see a pair of feet sticking out and up and down, obviously somebody doing push-ups up on up on some sort of a box. So it's just kind of an odd thing because it was way in the back of the convention center. There's nobody else around, so we kind of walked over there to maybe see who it was, and lo and behold, Tommy Young doing push-ups, pissed off that he got himself all dirty. But we had a couple of moments of, he had a couple of candid moments with us, and he was a heck of a nice guy. And guys, if you're still listening to the show, I want to say thank you very much. I will have a slideshow to go along with this portion of our program, so you can catch some pictures of Steve The Scum with some of the performers there at WrestleCade. We're real happy, real proud of the event, so we want to share a couple of great photos with you. And at the end of our show, because it is our season finale, we'll have a little video montage of some of the best performers from WrestleCade talking about Steve The Scum. Real excited for you guys to watch that. So stay tuned to the end of our program, our season finale program. But season 1 of WGD Weekly with Steve The Scum's about to be in the bag. So thanks once again for being a fan. We picked up almost 300 subscribers on YouTube in our first season. Almost 30,000 hits on YouTube. Some awesome stuff there. Over 1,000 downloads on iTunes, too. We're really kicking it up into high gear. But we know it's that time of the year that everybody usually gets a little hectic and their schedules get broken up. And then, Steve The Scum are in that same boat. So we're going to take just a couple of weeks off and spend some time with our families through the holiday season. We want you guys to do the same, and we hope you had a great Thanksgiving. But I'll tell you what, Scum, and we're going to go back and forth on this little section of our show. But let's tell our listeners a couple of the guys that we have already booked, lined up, and some of them are even in the bag for next season. What do you say, my man?
Absolutely, Steve. I think there's a lot coming up. We always say you have used since our inception the term irons in the fire back when we were talking the old double cross ranch, way back when Scott Hudson and Paul Ellering and those guys first came on, and it kind of got the ball rolling for us here. But yeah, not to mention some of the great contacts that we made at WrestleCade. But coming up here, we still, even though we're taking a break from our on-air product as we get ready for our huge season 2 and some huge announcements that we'll be making, that you'll want to keep in touch with us on our Facebook page at WGD Weekly, is we are still doing our interviews to get prepared for season 2. And I know one, Steve, that really near and dear, in case anyone hasn't been listening or noticed or just wasn't paying attention, that Georgia Championship Wrestling area. We've had Jake the Snake, and we've had Ted DiBiase and Road Warrior Animal and Paul Ellering. Well, we actually have put the wraps on a fantastic interview with the Hands of Stone, Ronnie Garvin, that'll be coming to you in season 2 that we really can't wait to let you hear. What a great down-to-earth guy he was, huh, Steve?
You said it best there, Scum. And, another funny scene from way back in the day, and his family has been in the news recently, and unfortunately not so great news. We did have Butcher Vachon sit down with us and do a great shoot interview, and this was simply, folks, literally days before his brother, the great Mad Dog Vachon, passed away. We are going to have a great sit down with Butcher Vachon. He's going to tell us all about his career, and we're going to get him back on the line and talk to him a little bit about what's going on with the family and how he's holding up after the loss of his brother, the late, great Mad Dog Vachon. So that is something incredible, too. Another guy from the glory days of wrestling that maybe kind of preceded us, Scum, but has some of the most memorable moments, including that crazy wedding on TNT. What are a couple of the other guys you're thinking about?
Well, I think that very relevant and very exciting for our fan base will be a couple of part 2s that we have coming up. One I know that's very near and dear to you that I'm going to let you, I'm going to send you a volley here and let you talk about the second of our part 2s that we're going to be doing. But one big one is our guest here tonight, Diamond Dallas Page, is going to be coming back with us. Not sure if we'll have a chance to get to the accountability crib before that interview or afterwards, but unlike tonight's interview where we touched mainly because of his engagement there with the NXT kids on some of the more recent stuff, we're going to get into some of the more classic stuff with DDP. Maybe we'll touch on some of the stuff of his time with the Freebirds. Maybe I would love to hear about, I know he's spoken at length about that great feud that kind of put him on the map as a main eventer with the Macho Man, Randy Savage, and the NWO there when he opted to not take the colors and spiked Holland Nash with the diamond cutter at that classic Nitro segment. So there's plenty of things. He worked with the Karl Malone and Jay Leno and even David Arquette. Be interesting to hear some of those takes, right, Steve?
Oh, absolutely. He's one of the greatest champions of all time. David Arquette, that is. Anyway, Moving on. Moving on from there, like you were saying, I'm gassed for this. I don't care when we air it, if we air it 3 weeks in a row. Love Jim Cornette. We got him back for part 2. His website, jimcornette.com, is back up and operational. It looks fantastic. Great facelift there, but he promised us a Dick Murdoch story, and I'm going to hold him to it, damn it. And I want to hear more about gimmicks and the legendary feuds from the Midnight Express and all of Cornette's other guys, and of course Vader, because we all know it's fucking Vader, man.
Absolutely. As Jim himself likes to say, we always welcome him here, and it will be a pleasure to have him here. And he is a man that has proclaimed at length that he always likes being had.
Absolutely, Scum. Tell our listeners about a very special episode that we're going to have with maybe a couple of guests and something that real near and dear to you personally, a guy that I've always enjoyed as well, but I know that you are a Andy Kaufman super fan. So give our listeners some insight on what's going on with that episode.
Well, a good lead into that I was going to touch on is I recently had seen on a kayfabe commentary release, I believe it was the World's Greatest Manager segment that they did where they counted down the top 5 when they were talking about Jim Cornette, and Bill Apter was on there and spoke about how Cornette had originally done the photographs for the magazine, which he told us about in part 1, and Apter had mentioned actually that Cornette was the photographer of those classic pictures from the Andy Kaufman Jerry Lawler match. Well, anyone who knows me or is familiar with me, obviously I have roots in wrestling from when I was a kid. I am a huge fan, have been for a long time. Steve, I know you are as well. But anyone who knows me personally also knows that I have always been a really huge fan of the sense of humor, the controversy that was drummed up, and just the overall act and performance of Andy Kaufman. Whether it was in the ring with the classic Lawler bit or any of his stuff. I mean, I can relate to it. Steve can vouch. Anyone who knows me, the origins of the Scum, the name The Scum, comes from our band that we used to do. It was a spin-off of Kaufman's classic alter ego, Tony Clifton.
Whoa. Hold up. Are you telling me, are you going on record right now, Scum, and you're saying that Andy Kaufman was one and the same as the great legendary lounge singer, the world famous Tony Clifton? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's debatable. The two have been seen on stage before together. So again, let's say that they were tied together. They certainly their careers were intertwined throughout. Let's say, the proof as far as who is who, as far as I know, last I knew, Clifton was still getting it done and still selling out a lot of those big soccer stadiums over in Peru, much like myself. I have a pretty big name and a lot of notoriety there in the in the southern part of America, let's say, a lot of big scum-oholics down there. So, myself and Clifton, we never shy away from sharing a tale or two. So, it's hard to say whether I guess I misspoke when I said alter ego, because you never know what the correlation is there between the two. But either way, what we're going to have coming on, and Steve, you know how special this will be for me. Not only do we have Bill Apter, who was the man who originally introduced Jerry Lawler and Andy Kaufman back in the days of Pro Wrestling Illustrated, but we also have an extremely special guest for that show. It's going to be an Andy Kaufman special about Andy's time in wrestling. Lynn Margulies Osgood, who was Andy's live-in girlfriend for the final, I believe, 3 to 5 years of his life, was portrayed in the Jim Carrey movie, the Kaufman biopic, Man on the Moon, by Courtney Love. Lynn is going to be joining us on the program, which is just fantastic. I mean, I know she has done a lot of DVD work. She has the Kaufman archives of all his old stuff. She released a book of when he was doing the intergender women's wrestling gimmick. She released a book. She saved all of the hate mail that he received and all of the inquiries about when he had asked on Saturday Night Live for the fans to send in why he should wrestle that woman, and they would send pictures. In the book, she titled it Andy Kaufman, I Hate Your Guts. So that's going to be on there. Interesting tidbit that I don't know if anyone outside of the Kaufman Nation, which is a fan base eerily similar to that of the wrestling fans, and a very passionate and hardcore, at times almost cult-like fan base. Andy and Lynn actually met as Lynn's brother, Johnny Legend, was involved in the West Coast professional wrestling scene. He was the producer of My Breakfast with Blassie, and Lynn was cast as the waitress at the restaurant there that they had breakfast at with Andy and Fred Blassie. So if you've ever seen My Breakfast with Blassie, the lady who takes the order when Blassie goes on the tirade and Kaufman orders the pancakes about it's all carbs, it's all dough, what are you doing to yourself, what are you doing to your body, in classic Blassie form, that waitress was Lynn Margulies. And that was where her and Andy met, and they wound up dating until his passing, or as we've come to find out recently, maybe his non-passing. You never know. It's still 30 years to the grave. Andy's still pulling one over on everyone. And Steve, that is going to be a really near and dear episode to myself. And I don't know you know that. I have all of the Kaufman footage, every piece of footage ever from him that was ever released or not released. I mean, that will just be something that's real special to me.
Oh yeah, Scum, and I can empathize there. We all have our favorites, and instead of being the man on the moon that day, I think you're going to be the man who jumped over the moon. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited to hear you get on there, and we'll definitely take the lead on those questions and knock it out of the park with two great guests, Lynn Margulies and Bill Apter. But Scum, I think that what we bring and what maybe interest a lot of our followers is that we interview not only classic professional wrestlers, but ones that kind of stay off the beaten path a little bit, ones that you don't always hear about. Certainly some that you do, and all of them but guys that just kind of stay out of the limelight, maybe had a longer road, let's say, before retirement. And this guy that I'm about to tell everybody, folks, don't miss this, because I can almost tell you now, we haven't recorded this yet. We're going to record it in just a short period of time for when this broadcasts on Wednesday, December 4th? Yes, you're going to hear this, folks, Wednesday, December 4th. We're going to record this on the 10th of December from Hawaii. Kevin Von Erich, folks. That's going to be a really good interview. He follows us on Twitter. He's a heck of a nice guy. He's filled with stories. We're going to keep this above the belt, so to speak. And I think as fans of classic wrestling, there's a responsibility there to let sleeping dogs lie and have Kevin be comfortable getting on the air with us. So we're going to accommodate him as he's going to be accommodating to us, I'm sure. And I am very excited about speaking with Kevin Von Erich. He's got millions of stories from all the days in World Class Championship Wrestling, all the big names that went through there. Skandor Akbar's Army, the Freebirds, you could just go on and on about some of the best angles and programs and feuds from classic professional wrestling. We were all kids, world class with some great stuff, Scum. And I know we got one other guy that pretty interesting character there. What do you think there, Scumster?
Yeah. A man who coined that phrase that you just brought up kept referring to me as a Scumster that I actually looking forward to possibly meeting when he's up here in Clayton coming up. My current or adopted hometown, let's say. And that's a man that someone who's become kind of popular for his outlandish speak, let's say, across places like the Howard Stern Show and Facebook or Twitter has referred to as the Brian Blair will be with us. That's B. Brian Blair to you fans out there, member of the Killer Bees, and I had a ton of great stuff to talk about. His longtime friendships with Hulk Hogan and Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, and just the years that he worked WWF against the Hart Foundation and the classic tag teams there. And he even touches on the stuff. He'll even be touching on the stuff with the Iron Sheik, which, always nice to hear where the origins of that whole mess that he's been back and forth with over the past few years started up. So B. Brian Blair does not disappoint. A lot of good rib stories. Actually, it talked about possibly coming back in the future and doing a story just on all the classic ribs from the 1980s. I know he dropped a pretty funny one involving the legendary Mr. Fuji with us, Steve. Possibly our first Fuji reference on the show. You can never go wrong with one of those, right?
Oh, absolutely. And, I'll tell you, folks, if you're like, well, B. Brian Blair, wasn't he just in the Killer Bees? And a lot of people may ask that same question, but tune into this show because this guy was genuinely excited to be on our show and brought it with enthusiasm. It was great to hear a guy have that much enthusiasm to talk about the glory days of professional wrestling. And if anything else, folks, a little spoiler from Steve here. He's going to tell you the story about what happened that day. Legendary change and WWF writing, WWF television had to take a dramatic left turn and it changed the careers of a lot of people. Was the infamous boating accident with Brutus the Barber Beefcake. He was there and watched what happened in person. I'm not going to give you a single hint as to what happened that day. But if you haven't heard it, folks, tune in to B. Brian Blair's interview with WGD Weekly with Steve The Scum just to hear that great story, because that in itself is worth the rest of the podcast, Scum. And do you want to give a little bit of insight as to a couple of things we got coming up next season above and beyond some of our great guests?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I mean that is it. That Blair recollection of that beefcake incident is, again, I'm not going to get into it and spoil it for the fans, but I'm glad that you did bring it up because it is in graphic detail and it is a very extremely first-hand account. I know I've heard of it and I had heard that he was on the scene, and when it came about through our speaking with him, it is some pretty jaw-dropping stuff. I mean, it is a pretty crazy story. But yeah, Steve, I would love to get into, as I always like to say, the irons that we have in the fire. Obviously at WrestleCade, we were there, some thanks to our sidekick for the day, Justin Credible, and some just in our own interaction and networking throughout the show, and our genuine excitement at seeing some of the legends. We have an unbelievable lineup or set of irons, so to speak, in the fire. I mean, we've talked the Double Cross Ranch, we've talked Kane, like setting things up. Forget about all that. We got a hell of a lineup coming up on top of those names that we just dropped on you. Just to give a few hints, maybe, at some of the people that you might be seeing in Season 2 on WGD Weekly. One guy that comes in particular that I think that I would be maybe the most excited about, again, they're all really exciting, but one guy is someone who, let's say, at one point was a big part of the symbol of excellence in professional wrestling.
Yeah, absolutely, Scum. Lots of irons in the fire that came out of WrestleCade weekend. But one thing that came out of WrestleCade and that's going to move forward is a relationship that the Steve The Scum have cultured with one Justin Credible. And I know you've heard his name several times on our show, and it's worth mentioning because this guy works his tail off as a human being, as a performer, as a family member. And we had a chance to sit down and just have a really good in-depth conversation with him when times were down throughout the weekend, and he's one heck of a guy. So we decided, Stephen the Scum did, to invite Justin Credible to be a part of our show. And it looks as though, and I can't tell you when, Scum, I don't think you have any more information than I do on the when and the where, but, well, the where is going to be here at WGD Weekly with Stephen the Scum, excuse me there, but when he will be on our show is still up in the air, but he told us that he would love to join us for not just one show, but several. So coming up next season, along with already great guests, a few hints of other great guests, we can tell you that we're going to have Justin Credible as a co-host with Stephen the Scum a couple times. So I'm incredibly excited about that, man.
Absolutely, and not to correct you on that, Steve, because that invitation for someone the caliber of Justin Credible is always there. He initiated that conversation.
He did. You're right.
Justin himself. Obviously the door is always open for a former world champion and someone who went out of their way to make things as special as for that. But Justin approached us with that, which was mind-boggling to me. I mean, say the word. I mean, he's always welcome to come on as a subject for an interview and anything like that. But he actually said to us, that, I enjoy you guys' stuff, and I would love to come on. And I mean, what a compliment! Just I say a lot of times, sometimes speaking to these people are humbling in some way, but for him to approach with that was again just mind-boggling to me. Yes, you're more than welcome anytime. You got Steve, you got the Scum, and you got Justin Credible. That's fantastic stuff. I mean, and then you got some of the other guys that we were speaking with that could possibly be coming on. Just to give a few more teasers here, I mean, I can specifically think off the top of my head of two WWE Hall of Famers, both of which at one point held the WWF Tag Team titles, one of which was a multiple-time Intercontinental Champion. I can think of one of the most legendary and most popular tag teams in the history of professional wrestling that we have made contact with that will possibly be on. Couple others too that just, Steve, I don't want to spoil the teaser because I know one of them is arguably your favorite performer of all time, my man. You want to keep the teasers coming?
Yeah, absolutely, I do. Let's talk about a guy that is definitely not afraid to bleed, and a guy that is one hell of a drinker, and we had a great time with him at the bar. I think we're going to have a raging good time when this guy shows up.
To say the least. Let's say between myself, Steve, and a performer that, unless they're listening, might not get this reference, but as to not throw anyone under the bus, that I've come to affectionately known as Mrs. Feelgood, decided that that this guest has become the first annual recipient of Stephen the Scum's all-around Savage at WrestleCade weekend.
Yeah, Savage of the event. This man won. Fire herself won hottest performer, the hottest female performer of WrestleCade. And folks, a bevy of talented young ladies there, and this one took the cake for Stephen the Scum's money. A lot more great stuff going on. We're almost out of time, Scum. Our season finale at WGD Weekly. Wanted to thank everybody once again for tuning in and listening. Thank all the admins over at Glory Days. Our Intercontinental correspondent, Matt, who's done a marvelous job helping us out, getting folks to look and like our page, WGD Weekly with Stephen the Scum on Facebook, at WGD Weekly on Twitter. Give us a follow there. We're going to still be active all over the internet while we're on our season break. I wanted to thank Dan, admin Dan from WGD, for making that awesome Wrestling Glory Days Weekly logo, that neon one that you see every time you tune into our show. That was Dan Warner. He is one hell of a guy. All the boys over there that support us and listen to us do. We really thank you. Moving on from there, we got Well, we got, actually, we're going to have a few more little tricks up our sleeve next season, and we're not going to tell you any more about them, but a slightly new format, and we're going to have another huge announcement shortly after our season opener next year 2014, that is. We're probably going to air our first program the first Sunday of the new year. So it's only going to be a couple of weeks off, guys, so stay close. We're going to be there, WGD Weekly with Steve The Scum. A great partnership about to form that we'd love to tell you more about, but now's not the appropriate time. If you guys know us, or if you watch our show religiously, you'll see a couple of different graphics that may give you a clue as to who that may be. So, you put two and two together. But Scum, it's been a wild first season, man. What are some of your favorite moments?
Well, first, Steve, before I get into the favorite moments, just a couple of things that I really want to remind the listeners about heading into season 2. We got a couple of really big giveaways that we haven't mentioned yet. First off, our guest from tonight, Diamond Dallas Page, was kind enough to donate a $100 set of DDP yoga DVDs, personally autographed.
That's
by
right.
him.
That's
Those will be given away early on in the first season. We also have, because the Scum, proving what he said way back with Stump the Scum, because the Scum has got the brains, baby. They had a trivia contest at WrestleCade, and immediately a light bulb went off on the Scum's enormous brain that, you know what? That would be a nice giveaway for our listeners. So the Scum moseyed up. They called him up. The question was something about the night Hogan won the strap from the Iron Sheik. I don't really recall the exact question. But he said, who do we have here? They said, well, who you have here is the Scum, baby. And you can vouch for me here, when WGD and the Scum were called out, that the place popped, once again proving what the Scum says, that he's over.
Well, I'll have to interject there real quick, Scum. While you were basking in what may be your own glory, they were actually already popping as soon as they just said WGD Weekly. But continue.
Well, you continue to tell yourself that, my friend. But I heard differently. When they knew they had the Scum, they knew that they had a unique talent, rarely seen, especially when it comes to the psychological part and the brains, baby. Anyhow, we got, all kidding aside, we got a beautiful piece of artwork from WrestleCade. And it has a nice painting of some of the performers. We got 14 different performers that signed this thing. We're going to be giving that away. We also it was Just Incredible was kind enough to give us some 8x10s that he autographed to give away. So there's going to be a lot of interactive stuff coming up in season 2 that our listeners can tune in and check out and, walk away with some free stuff. Our first season, we gave away the Lex Luger autobiography, and the Boogie Woogie Man was nice enough to put his name down on an 8x10 that we gave away to one of our lucky listeners. So, that will be in some new features that we'll have to figure out how we're going to be giving that stuff away. One that I couldn't believe that you didn't want to touch on. I know you went with the raging possibility of a guest, but another teaser of a guest that I thought you might have dropped in was, let's say, a couple of guys that if we don't give a teaser on them, they might kick our stinking teeth down our throats. Could possibly be here in the near future too, Steve.
Well, I'm actually hoping, Scum, and with this, we'll have to have a private, closed-door, backstage discussion meeting about this, a creative meeting, if you will. Should we interview those two savages together as that team, or should we do it separately because they're two individually legendary performers?
Oh yeah, I would say unlike the other two gentlemen that we spoke of, I would say that those will be two separate shows because both of them have unbelievable tale to tell and just out of this world. Another one that we forgot to throw the teaser on was let's say someone who went from being as sweet as sugar to later on in his career making sure that everybody stands back as to avoid some lousy weather. if you hear what I'm screaming here, there's another possible guess. And just because of some of we had some unfortunate circumstances, we still have our fingers crossed that we can bring to you some of the stuff from WrestleCade. Let's say I go by the moniker The Scum, but we're pretty certain that the meaning of a term of a scum took on a whole new level, as we believe that some of our equipment was jacked on our way out of the hotel, let's say, leaving WrestleCade. Unfortunately, we had some great footage there. So who knows? Maybe we'll have a reuniting of the up-and-coming team from that evening. Maybe we'll get our hottest performer of the weekend, and we can reunite Feel Good and The Scum and see if we can't get a few more knife-edge chops thrown.
Oh, my God. I know, and when I think about that, now let me elaborate a little bit. We're on our way out of the building on a Sunday morning after 2 straight raging days of pro wrestling and Jägermeister and chicken wings. Had a great weekend, just going nuts being wrestling fans. And some shyster decided they wanted to dip into one of our bags and steal the audio recorder that we put all of our interviews on for the weekend. So, yeah, a real bummer there. A real shitty experience to leave and a bad taste in our mouths as we walked out of the door at WrestleCade. But we know that Tracy Meyer's staff was awesome. The entrepreneur, the P.T. Barnum, as The Scum says, of WrestleCade, he was awesome. We know that it had nothing to do with WrestleCade, nor the performers, nothing like that. It was just a bad experience from a bad person that was very individual to himself. And, you'll get your comeuppance, pal. We know who you are. Don't worry.
Not an unfortunate, not a scum, a thief is what it was. It was a thieving is what happened. No need to sugarcoat it. Yeah. A damn criminal.
Yeah, someone just came in and blatantly stole our stuff, and that's some shitty thing to do.
That's no reflection on the WrestleCade team
none.
Or anything to do with any of the people with that. That's just some people, and I don't know what they thought they were getting, but what they walked with was it was a nice recorder, but I mean the stuff would be useless to some idiot that just randomly took it, which is why there was plenty of other electronics and stuff there. So I don't know whoever they are. I'm sure they're not listening. If for some reason they were listening, on behalf of The Scum and Steve, you can do us all a favor. On behalf of some of the friends we made up at WrestleCade, Mr. Fernandez,
Gunner,
Ms. Feelgood, Mr. USA. I think all of them can jump in and agree with a good old hearty "go fuck yourself," whoever stole that thing.
Absolutely.
And you can take that right to the bank, and hopefully we can magically somehow get it back. The Scum's on the case, but if not, unfortunate things happen, but we'll continue to bring you the best, and it won't be our last trip to some venues of that nature. Won't be the last time we have that, but unfortunately there was a dynamite interview with Justin Credible that I had spoken about in the piece that I wrote, kind of giving Justin some recognition for his actions and getting there and stuff. Just a really heartfelt and a very real, passionate interview, not much about his career so much as about psychology and his struggles and his coming back, and it was just a dynamite. I know Steve and I both listened to it afterwards and were really proud of the work that we did, and grateful for Justin doing it. We had the chance to actually take on the role of kind of on-air interviewers, where Steve and I were did a lead-in and caught some of the performers on their way to the ring. We got to interview in character Justin Credible before the I Quit match as the referee, Matt Hardy prior to the World Championship match, referee Tommy Young,
Jillian Hall,
the Robert Gibson of the Rock and Roll Express, Manny Fernandez, Buff Bagwell, and they were all interviews kind of in character, something that we never had the chance to do, so it was really special to us. So again, whoever walked with that recorder, you completely suck. We spit on the ground that you walk on, and you should be ashamed when you look yourself in the mirror, because I may call myself a scum, but you, my friend, are a grade A piece of shit scum. That's all I got to say about that.
Well, that's all there is to say about that. There's not much more we could do other than say that the next time we go there, I'm going to look him up, and I'm bringing Gunner from TNA with me, because that guy's a total fucking savage. I'm definitely bringing that dude.
The one piece. I'm gonna bring the one piece of memorabilia that I walked from the venue with too. See if I can't wrap that upside his ear,
folks. And I'm gonna tell everybody what that is, Scum, because this is one hell of a souvenir. So Scum's walking around, and I'm doing my business with Just Incredible. He comes back with a kendo stick, and signed by Tommy Dreamer, no less. So that's fantastic. So who do we have at our table? None other than ECW legend, hardcore icon, Just Incredible. No stranger to a kendo stick or a Singapore cane, however have you. He signs it. Later on in the day, we find another complete bloodthirsty savage, Steve Carino, walking down the hall. He stops, takes a picture with us. One hell of a nice guy. And he signs it. And who else did you get, Scum, on that kendo stick?
The other one was also the Extreme Horseman, C.W. Anderson. So on all four rungs of the Singapore cane, four legends from the ECW days, Carino, Dreamer, Justin, and C.W. So again, I'm not a big memorabilia guy. I like to get the pictures. It's funny to meet and have a shot of, for no other reason than to show the fans and the loyal followers, the Scum Nation out there, me and Steve kind of palling around with some of these legends. But, personally, when I saw Dreamer with those canes and I got talking to him, and you can actually see on the page, you can see that he has a pretty dry sense of humor with the look on his face in that picture that he took. But, they're, pretty cool, back to the days. Talk the glory days and when your glory days was. I was always a big fan of ECW, and pretty unique item to have the Singapore cane signed by those four legends from the Extreme days. So, it's hard to not let the fan in you come out at an event like that.
No, absolutely not, Scum. Classic wrestling at its finest. Kids in a candy store. Just Incredible was a kid in the candy store. I remember when Tommy Young, of all people, walked by. I'm like, no way, Tommy Young. Just Incredible looks up with that same gleam in his eye that I know I had, and I know you had, and he was like, no way, where is he? Oh, man, is that Bob Caudle? Like, is that Thunderbolt Patterson? Unbelievable stuff. He was as big a fan as the two idiots that he's standing next to, so that was really cool.
Sure.
And, it's just a great
one of my favorites was when we looked over to our left, and I was like, man, Tully Blanchard's been working his ass off. And he was like, holy shit, Tully Blanchard's here?
How about this when he actually had dipped out for a little bit and just went, made rounds. He doesn't come to the South very much, and there's tons of performers down here that I'm sure he's worked with, and we all know, if you follow wrestling, you follow our show even, Justin's been on, and he's admittedly said that he's on the phone several times a week, like you and I, Scum, with Scott Hall, and of course Cody was there, so he wanted to go over and say hello, but while he did that, we were tending to things over at our table, and up comes this complete savage of a man who was dressed as Abyss. And maybe one of the funniest photos ever came out of that. So you'll see that. We'll throw that into the slideshow here at the end of our show. But this guy, and again now, we told you how big we were as far as it goes. Normal-sized guys. This guy was a fucking monster. And the look on our faces in that picture is absolutely priceless. So I hope you guys can enjoy that. Many more things to come. Season 2 WGD Weekly with Steve The Scum. Partnerships abounding. Guest hosts, guest stars, giveaways, shit. Where else you going to get that on wrestling radio? Come on, guys. Tune into WGD Weekly. Tell your wrestling pals about it. Who knows? We may even talk about the current product next year if we run out of shit to do. Either way, thank you so much for listening. We're running out of time. Scum, what do you got to add before we sign off for the season and enjoy our time with our families?
Couple more quick things here to add before we sign off, Steve. A couple more shout-outs from WrestleCade. I know after what we had spoken about, and this is the last we'll bring up with the recorder, a gentleman that we met on the way in that actually was buddies with the Rock and Roll Express, and actually when you had first arrived and I had said, yeah, Robert Gibson sitting down here in the lobby. Gentleman by the name of Russ Stiles, who was actually there a day afterwards and went above and beyond on the search for us. We don't even know him. I mean, we just met him over the weekend. Just a rabid wrestling fan of the Mid-Atlantic days and the old school days of, Carolina wrestling and up and down in the southern states here. So I just wanted to give a shout out and say thanks to Russ, for his hard work and for trying to find our stuff and, just for we appreciate fans like that, and we appreciate people doing stuff like that. So I know he had become privy to our show, and is going to be listening in. So if you're listening out there, pal, I just wanted to say thanks for your efforts that were not necessary but much appreciated. Once again, thank you to Just Incredible for adding to an absolutely incredible weekend, excuse the pun, for myself and Steve. Thanks to Manny Fernandez for some hilarious memories. Thanks to who am I forgetting?
Fireman.
Of course, our friend that we made from the Wonderful Women of Wrestling, is it, Steve?
Let's just call it WOW. I don't know what it is. WOW Superheroes.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I know it's the Superheroes. Great girl that was a lot of fun and has a great future in the business. I think you'll see big things out of her if she's listening in. Great to meet you, and hopefully we'll have a chance to get you back on the show and get the word out for you out there. That's about it. Again, just wanted to thank mostly our listeners, the rabid savages, as you like to call them, Steve, the WGD faithful, the scum nation out there who have made it possible to take the words that I was saying at first that kind of sounded funny and make them true, and that's that WGD Weekly, without a doubt, we saw it firsthand up in Winston-Salem this weekend, is unquestionably the latest sensation sweeping the wrestling radio nation, baby.
Oh, you said it best, my friend. Oh, so give us a follow on Twitter. We're going to try to get more active on Twitter next season at WGD Weekly. And follow my boys over at Wrestling's Glory Days. We're both admins at Wrestling's G Days over at Wrestling's Glory Days on Facebook. Once again, at WGD Weekly for Steve the Scum. We wanted to thank Fire, Ryan Shamrock, Just Incredible, 3-4 more other guys. I don't have Twitter up in front of me, but thank you guys all for the recent follows. We'll make sure that we retweet your stuff. All you guys out there who are on Twitter, follow us. We'll follow you back. We'll stay in touch. We post our shows on Twitter as well every Sunday, so if that's a way you want to watch us, definitely do that. Some great stuff on the horizon for WGD Weekly, and especially for Steve the Scum. So thanks once again for listening, guys. Have a great holiday season. Enjoy the time with your families. We're going to be back sometime right after the new year, so stay tuned. You never know what you're going to get. Well, you know half the season apparently now on WGD Weekly with Steve the Scum, but we got a lot more surprises that you don't quite know about just yet.
Thanks to everybody, and as somebody kind of mockingly looked at me when I threw this their way in one of our interviews that got taken from our bag on the way out the door, come on, baby, light my fire. We'll see you soon, people. Enjoy the holiday.
Or we're going to kick your stinking teeth down your throat.
This is Action Smash and Demolition with Steve the Scum. Every week, WGD Weekly. We listen to it, you should too. You better, or we're gonna kick your stinking teeth in.
Hi, this is Hall of Famer Greg the Hammer Valentine, and you're watching WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum.
Yeah, this is the modern-day Viking Gunner from Impact Wrestling, and you're listening to WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum.
Hell yeah. Listen, it's professional wrestling. Jimmy Bad, the Booger Wooger may tell my people, my brothers and sisters, don't you dare miss WGD with Weekly with the man Steve and the Scum. Oh yeah.
I'm here on Wrestling Glory Days with Steve and the Scum. It's amazing to see the people here today. Absolutely amazing, and it's amazing to me to see some of the old-timers and legends like myself. But one of the things that amazes me, everybody comes up to me and says, we wish wrestling was like it used to be. Now, there must be a viewing audience for that. I'm a huge baseball fan, as you can tell, but there is an American League and there is a National League, and they both play different baseball. One got a designated hitter, the other one pitcher hits. It is a completely different game if you know anything about it. So maybe someday down the line, will be a different league coming along, and we can compare notes, because when wrestling was at the highest, was the Monday Night Wars, when they had competition against one another. So it will be good to see that back. So being on Wrestling Glory Days has made my life complete. I can now go back to the pyramids, eat some betel nut with the Lady of the Third Eye, and relax. Thank you.